All righty. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so excited to have you here tonight. And I'm Judith Alexander with a shirt on the back of my chair I'm going to get rid of. The Seattle Storytellers Guild is so pleased to be having a program tonight that's like a story swap, that's encouraging novice tellers and experienced tellers and faraway tellers and local tellers to come together to share our stories. And we're so glad you came. And there are some mechanics that we usually do talk about. So we're thanking, this is our last StoryFest of the season. We will be doing third Fridays again in September. We want to thank Barry McWilliams, who is our Zoom host, for handling the tech, and to Ann Brendler for assisting with that, so you can clap. And for the other things you need to know, well, you know where the restroom is and where to get the coffee or snacks. And you probably have already muted your phone, just in case. Thank you very much. During the program, we ask you to remain muted, you know, the lower left-hand corner where the microphone is, and to refrain from using the chat while the tellers are telling, because it's usually a bit distracting. We'll applaud when the tellers are finished, and then at the end of the program, we'll let everyone unmute to ask questions, to applaud the tellers or give them compliments, ask questions, and just chat with each other. So we'll do that at the end. The program's being recorded, but if a teller doesn't want their story posted on the website, they'll let Barry know so that he doesn't include it in what goes up. We were inspired to have this StoryFest featuring all levels of tellers because we had a May workshop with Margaret Reed McDonald, who's a mentor to many of us. And it was called Playing with Story. And we had so much fun. And the tellers told stories in pairs to each other and in triads to each other. They told in a group setting. They acted the stories out. They told to a wall. They told walking through the forests. They did all kinds of things to learn the stories and get confident. And so we wanted to encourage them to come and tell. And Ellen is here and she'll tell, and I'm going to tell at least half of one of the stories. And then we're having people from everywhere, from Portland, Oregon, to upstate New York, from California, we think, to Canada. And I'm sure that we're going to have a wonderful time. Margaret Reed McDonald is traveling and can't come. Otherwise, we'd probably hear from her too. But I think we'll have fun in her honor. I will start out the program with a story, a short one of Margaret's stories, and then we'll all send very supportive thoughts to Ellen, who's going to be telling her story for the first time here. She was at the workshop with others, and so maybe she'll even say something about that. So sit back, relax, and be prepared to entertain. No, be prepared to be entertained. There we go. Okay. So, from Estonia, where I visited one world famous storyteller some time ago, comes this story. Miku wanted to go out and gather firewood for his fire. And he walked into the woods and he realized that he could just gather wood with the branches that had fallen from trees. but that would take a long time, and it was hard work. He had his axe, so he decided that he would just chop down a whole tree. And indeed, he saw one, raised his axe, chop! Don't do that! Stop! Stop! A talking tree? Why not? I'm a birch tree. A birch tree. You make baskets out of me, and you use your twigs, my twigs, to make your brooms. Don't cut me down. Oh, said Miku. You're right. That's very useful. Very well, I won't cut you down. Thank you, Miku. Remember, you take care of us, and we'll take care of you. Miku walked on. Oh, that was a nice big straight cherry tree. He lifted his axe and chop. Wait, don't cut me down. Why ever not? I'm a cherry tree. If you cut me down, you won't get any more cherry pies. Oh, then I won't cut you down. Thank you, Miku. You remember, you take care of us, and we'll take care of you. Miku went on into the forest. There was a really big, shady, leafy tree. He raised his axe. Chop! Stop! You don't want to chop me down. No? Why not? Because I'm a maple tree. From my sap, you get maple syrup and maple sugar. Don't cut me down. Oh, that's right. I wouldn't want to cut you down. I won't. Thank you, Miku. Remember, you take care of us, and we'll take care of you. Miku went on into the forest, and he found so many different trees, but the pine tree gave him pine cones to start his fire. The walnuts gave their nuts. The cedar trees sheltered small animals in the winter from the snow. Miku sat down and thought about that. You know, all these trees are useful. They all give us something. I don't think I can cut any down. I think I will collect my firewood from the forest floor. And soon as he said these words, a little man jumped out from behind a tree. Strange little man. He had an acorn for a hat, and birch bark suit, and thistle down for shoes. It's so strange. The little man said, Miku, thank you. You've decided to save my trees. That's the right thing to do, and I'm going to give you a present. And he handed Miku a wooden wand. This wand will give you anything you want as long as it's a part of nature. This is our thanks. You can ask for what you want. And for example, if you want honey, you show the wand to the bees. If you want berries, show it to the birds. If you need your field plowed, show it to the moles. But remember, you must not ask for anything that is not natural. If it goes against nature's laws, it won't work. Don't do that. And the man disappeared. Luckily, Miku had said thank you. He took the wand and he went on home and wondered, would it really work? Well, He decided to try it out, and he showed the wand to the bees. I'd like some honey. We'll do it. We'll do it. And before you knew it, here they came, carrying a honeycomb dripping with sweet honey. Great. So then he showed it to the birds. I'd like some berries. We'll do it. We'll do it. And off they flew, and they came back and filled Miko's bowl. And in the spring, when it was time to plow the field, Miko went out with the wand and showed it to the moles. Moles, I have a field to plow. Oh, we can do it, Miko. We can do it. Thank you, thank you. And so the moles plowed his whole field. And then he showed the wand to the ants and said, ants, I have some seed to sow. We'll be glad to do that. We'll plant your seed. And sure enough, they planted all the seeds. Well, Miko grew a bit lazy. He grew rich. He grew boastful and proud. He got used to giving commands. And one day, on a cold winter day, he happened to be out in the field, and it was cold. He hated the cold. It was gray and rainy, drip. Oh, he just hated it. And without thinking, he raised the wand to the clouds and said, sun, come out from behind the cloud and shine on me. I want it to be hot. I want to be hot, hot, hot. You can imagine. Miko should never have said those words. The sun did come out. It started to shine. Hot, hot, hot. The sun focused on Miko, and he grew hot, hot, hot. And he disappeared. And the wand was gone too. That's what happened. And the rest of the story we'll hear at the end. Thank you. And now we're going to have Ellen, who was at the workshop, and she lives in West Seattle and enjoyed the workshop, but this is the first time she's telling the story. So we're going to send her lots of supportive thoughts. Thank you. And applause for Ellen.
Thank you. And thank you, Judith. I can't wait to hear the end of it. So yes, I went to that workshop and it was fabulous. And Margaret was so encouraging. And one of the things I loved was that she said, you really just need an hour to learn a tale, which made it seem way less overwhelming. And even so, I wasn't going to sign up, but I thought I'd better do it. And so I'm sure a lot of you have heard Maybella the Clever. It's in Margaret Reed MacDonald's book, Teaching with Story. And she used that book for the workshop. And so Maybella the Clever is based on a limbic folktale from Sierra Leone. Oh, I have to put my cheat sheets away. I'm putting them away. So Maybella the Clever. Maybella was a little mouse. Most of the mice, way back long ago, most of the mice were foolish and most of the cats were clever. But Maybella was a very clever mouse because her father taught her 4 very important things. And the first one was, Maybella, when you are out and about, open your ears wide and listen. The second one was, Maybella, when you are out and about, open your eyes wide and look around you. And the third one was, Maybella, when you are speaking, listen to what you are saying. And the fourth bit of cleverness was, Maybella, if you have to move, move fast. So Maybella had 4 really wonderful, clever pieces of advice from her father, and she just loved, she had a great life in the little mouse village with all her friends and family. And one day, Cat came along, and he showed up in the village. And he said, hello, mice. And the mice were so like, well, there's Cat. They're a little scared of him, but here he is. And the cat said, I have an invitation. I would like to invite you all to my house, where I will teach you the secrets of cats. The mice were so thrilled. Usually they're scared of cats and cats want to chase them, but this cat wanted to invite them into his life. So they're just waiting with anticipation. Yes, yes, we want to do that. And the cat said, come to my house at 9 a.m. Monday morning, and I will teach you the ways of Cat. So at 5 minutes to 9 a.m. Monday morning, all the mice from the village are all outside Cat's house. And Cat opens his door and says, ah, you all have come here. How delightful. Now I will teach you the secret cat song. Oh dear, excuse me. As we march. Sorry, commercial. Okay, end of commercial. When we are marching, we never look back. The cat is at the end, faux fang, faux fang. So the little mice are like, ooh, I get it, I get it. And they start singing the song, and they're singing it all over the place. And then they suddenly sing it in unison, and the cat said, perfect. Now let's march in a straight line out to the woods. The smallest mouse can go in front. That would be you. That was Maybella. Maybella's so proud and pleased she gets to lead the line of mice. When we are marching, we never look back. The cat is at the end, faux fang, faux fang. Wah! When we are marching, we never look back. The cat is at the end, faux fang, faux fang. Maybella's getting a little nervous. That wasn't part of the song, but she keeps marching and singing until she remembered her father telling her, Maybella, when you are out and about, open your ears and listen. So as she's marching, she sings a little more softly so she could listen. She did not hear a long line of mice singing, and the cat sounded kind of close behind her. When we are marching, we never look back. The cat is at the end, faux fang, faux fang. Oh my goodness, she's still a little nervous. And then she remembers her father saying, Maybella, when you are out and about, open your eyes and look around. So she takes a sly peek to the right. She takes a sly peek to the left. She sees a very short line of mice, and the cat is close behind her. Oh my goodness. She tries to keep singing, when we are marching, we never look back. And she suddenly remembers, Maybella, when you are speaking, listen to what you are saying. When we are marching, we never look back. The cat is at the end. The cat is at the end. The cat is at the end. The cat. No one's watching the cat. Oh my goodness. No wonder she's so scared. And then she remembers her father saying, Maybella, if you have to move, move fast. And she moved. And the cat moved. But the cat pounced onto the shrub, and Maybella ran under the shrub, and the cat's all stuck in the shrub. And can't get out. Oh, and Maybella is so happy, and she dashes away back to the mouse village. Oh, where, to this day, she's shared with her children and her grandchildren the 4 pieces of wisdom from her father that saved her life. And to this day, the Limba parents are telling their children these 4 pieces of wisdom. And if you ever find an older person telling you something wise, open your ears and listen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. That is great. So, and that cat was very clever, and I love that he got so stuck in the bush. That was super duper. That was a great rendition of Maybella the Clever.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, because Beverly is 3 hours ahead of us back in upstate New York, she asked to come be next. And actually, she asked very early. This is her place in line. And she has been, I run into her when I go to the Northeast Storytellers Guild, and I run into her other places. And she's come to us in Seattle before. So I'm really excited to hear her story. So here's Beverly Schwartz.
Hi, everyone. It's so good to see everyone again. I was kind of in an accident and kind of had to take a little time off, you know. Well, the name of the story is The Brewery of Eggshells. Now, Susan Ida Bucco from Canada, Toronto, and I decided to do a tandem story using this story. And we looked at different publications, and we chose one of The Brewery of Eggshells in 1844, and another one was published in 1892. And we took these two versions and we combined them and created our own. And we've been going around doing tandem story of The Brewery of Eggshell. And tonight is my premiere of me telling it for the very first time alone. So I hope you enjoy it. The Brewery of Eggshells. There once lived a Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan who had twin boys, which Mrs. Sullivan nursed tenderly. One day, a neighbor from a distance away contacted her and had an emergency and requested her to help. Now, she really didn't want to leave her children in a solitary home, especially since she heard that there was goblets and blue petticoats switching children in the area for dwarfs. But she decided to go and help her neighbor anyway with her emergency, and then she would rush right back home. So she attended the emergency and was rushing down the path as fast as she could to get back home to her twins, when some goblets and blue petticoats crossed her path, and though it was midday, oh my God, she just ran like the devil as fast as she could to her house, ran into the house, and there in the bedroom were her twins sleeping peacefully in their cribs. She gave such a sigh of relief. Then one night, her boys started screeching and crying, and they shriveled up into mere skeletons. Oh my God, I think they had been switched. She was so upset, and she started telling her neighbors, my boys, they're like all shriveled up and they're screeching and crying. What do I do? And they said, to try to comfort her, your children have been replaced by two ugly dwarfs. And they tried to tell her what she could possibly do to get her children back. Now, she didn't really want to harm her children. And one of the reasons is they had a strong resemblance to her, looking like her regular children. And they would say to her, if you want your children back, you are to burn them alive on a griddle. Another one said, you take a hot tongue and burn their noses off. And another said, if it's snow outside, you throw them in the snow and you leave them there. But poor Mrs. Sullivan did not want to injure those in the cradle because they resembled her children so much. Well, it caused a great strife in the whole village because she wouldn't do anything that they were telling her to do to get her children back. Well, every night she'd sit by the fireplace and think and rock back and forth, wondering what she could do to get those children back. One night she had an idea. I know. I will go visit the old wise woman of the village, Ellen Leah. Maybe she will have an idea of how to get my children back. And the next morning, just as the sun rose, she hurried up and got dressed, and she ran down to the village where Ellen Leah lived. And she knocked on that door. And Miss Ellen Leah opened the door quickly and said, "Mrs. Sullivan, you look in grief this morning. What's the matter?" "Well, yes, I have every right to look like I'm in grief, for my own children were whipped out of their cradles without even asking or telling me, and they were switched by two ugly dwarfs." "Are you sure they're dwarfs?" "Every mother knows their children. I know my children were switched by two ugly dwarfs." "Well, Ellen, will you listen to an old wise woman? I'll do anything at this point. Tell me what I can do to get my children back." "Well, when the day of the reap comes and you are going to feed them dinner, to the reapers, you're to take a shell of a hen's egg and scoop it out. Make some porridge and pour it into the shell's eggs, and then put it over to the fireplace and wait till the porridge boils. And gently put them on a tray and walk slowly out the door and stand there and listen. And if you hear those in the cradle speak beyond the understanding of children, you are to run back, swoop them up, run to the nearest river, and throw them in. But if you do not hear them speak, then do no injury to them." So the day of the reap came. Mrs. Sullivan got some shells of an egg, a hen's egg, filled them with porridge after she scooped them out, and put them on the fire and let it boil. And then she put them on the tray and quietly walked out the door and stood at the doors outside and didn't make a sound. And she listened to see if she could hear those dwarfs talk. And then she heard them talk. "Acorn before oak I knew, an egg before a hen, but I've never heard of an eggshell brew, a dinner for harvest men." She had heard them talk. She dropped the tray. It crashed all over. She ran into the cradles and she swooped up those dwarfs and she ran to the nearest river and she threw them in. But then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw two goblins in blue trousers run out of the woods, jump into the river, and save the dwarfs. She continued running as fast as she could into the house, into the cradles, and there were her two loving twin boys sleeping tenderly back in their cribs. They were back. She had done it. And she took those two boys in her arms and rocked them. And then she nursed them tenderly. Thank you.
That was something. Wow. Wow. I never heard of an eggshell brew. And what ugly babies. Ah, I'm glad she got her own back. And that would be interesting to hear told in tandem. So maybe sometime you'll let us know you're doing it.
Yeah, we go all over. We've done Australia, India, Toronto, all over the U.S. and Canada. So if you ever want us to do a tandem, it's really good. She's good. She's a good storyteller.
Great. That's really super. So thank you very much for telling that story. And now we'll move on to Sarah Stein. And Sarah lived in Portland and then went off to Germany. And she lived there for 10 years. And while she was there, she told stories in the Grimm's brothers' hometown, their childhood town, as well as I had told some of you, we told in a castle near Munich together. So that was fun too. Anyway, she's back in Portland, part of the Portland Storytellers Guild, and she's bringing us a story about a wedding in India. So welcome, Sarah. Oops, you're muted, and Barry's going to spotlight you. Thank you.
I'm engaged, said my son on the phone. I had just visited him in London, where I had lunch with him and a lovely Indian woman that I knew he was dating. I was really glad that he had finally made up his mind because he had trouble committing. Then things happened quickly. My son and Ruth went to India to meet her parents and to find a place where they could have the wedding. Her parents were devout Christians, and my son was Jewish, but it didn't matter. They loved each other from the first time they met. Then they went to find a place to have the wedding. They found a 5-star resort in Kerala, near the Arabian Sea. The wedding was going to be in March, a very hot month, but when is it cold in India? That meant that I had to get myself there. I was living in Germany, and my sister-in-law, Andrea, and her husband, Achim, and Andrea's daughter, Miriam, were all going to go. Luckily, Achim had been to India many times, so he arranged the flight, which went very smoothly for the two of us. Unfortunately, Miriam and Andrea missed the flight and had to take the next flight. We arrived in India at 2 a.m. in the morning, and the heat hit us in the face. Humid and hot. A taxi driver from the resort met us and was going to drive us there, which would take 2 hours. During these 2 hours, all we ever heard was the taxi driver going, honk, 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 honk. It was the only way he could get the other taxis to let him go through. Absolute chaos. But we got there. I looked out the window and I saw India for the first time in the dusk. Very quiet, unusual, and it was magical. We got to the resort. We were tired. We just wanted to go to sleep. But that wasn't so easy. You see, the hotel manager had quit his job the night before and taken all the paperwork with him. Half hour passed, nothing happening. So we took things into our own hands. We looked at the list. We saw Andrea's name, and we said, this is Andrea's husband, and we want this room, which we got. I didn't know where my room was. It didn't matter. I had half of a queen-size bed. And I said, if I was sleeping next to Jack the Ripper, it wouldn't have mattered. The next morning, they brought us breakfast. Things were better. Then they found my room, and when I went into my room, I was speechless. Antique wooden furniture, intricately carved, a bed with a canopy and mosquito net. It felt like I was in an Indian fairy tale. Then I went outside to check out the grounds. A coconut tree, the tree of Kerala, flowers, orchids, roses, jasmine, some of which were arranged in a mandala. My first experience with the colors of India. The guests started arriving, and Ruth's family numbered at least 200 people, because in India, everybody is invited. We only had 50 Americans and Germans, but didn't matter. That evening, there was going to be a dance and a barbecue. Now, the dance was going to be the ancient art of Caracalla. It was at 7 in the evening, so I arrived there at 7 to get a seat. Nobody was there. I realized I was on Indian time now. At 8, people started dribbling in, and the dance began. I expected a wild dance about an Indian god, but I asked the people what was the subject, because they were holding a plastic doll, and they said, it's the birth of Christ. The birth of Christ in March. Ruth's family had picked the subject, but I still enjoyed it, and the plastic baby was awfully cute. Then the barbecue began. Oh, the best of Indian cuisine behind the tables. My favorite was chicken timbala and lamb masala. Wonderful. The next day, after lunch, we went to the marriage room. Ruth was getting her hair done, makeup. Then they went to us. They were going to put on our saris. 1 hour it took. Mine was beautiful, but was a problem. I had given Ruth's mother, who had bought it for me, the wrong bust size. And I couldn't breathe very well. But it closed, and I hoped I wouldn't pass out, which I didn't. Then the wedding began. It was on the water, on a barge, garlands of flowers over the barge, 2 sofas on the barge, once again, for the family, for the mother and father of the groom and bride. That was when I missed my husband, who had passed away 7 years ago. But I knew that he was watching his son from heaven. The wedding began. My son came in his brand new blue suit. Ruth came on the arm of her father. Her mother sang hymns in Hindi, language of India, and in English. Her father gave a speech about how happy he was that Ruth was getting married, although he was sorry he was going to lose her. In India, if you're 35 like she was, you're considered an old maid. Then the pastor came on the stage. Fire and brimstone. I totally ignored him. Ruth and Aaron switched rings. I took off the veil of Ruth in front of Ruth's face and was able to see her radiant face. Then they kissed. Well, the pastor told them they shouldn't do it. They did it anyway. Then we had, I have to think. We had another reception. And Ruth changed into a beautiful red and green sari with gemstones. It looked like she had come from the sky. And Aaron had a silk man's jacket. I told a story about Moses Mendelssohn and his wife. Aaron then broke a glass that was wrapped in a napkin on the floor. This is a Jewish custom. He also gave a speech about him and Ruth, went up and down, but the chemistry never left. Then the dancing began, and that's when the liquor started flowing. Luckily, Ruth's mother and father had gone to bed. You see, Aaron's friends had gone to the next town and brought home a truckload full of liquor. But so they drank and they danced to recorded music. Aaron showed his best dance steps and Ruth went along. It was midnight and I was exhausted. So I went back to my room. But the young people danced all night long. 2 days in magical India. 2 days that I will never forget. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. We could feel like we were there. My goodness,
so.
What an adventure.
Mm.
Yes. And I think we won't forget that wedding either. So thank you so much, Sarah. Now, Pat Peterson is going to tell us a story. And Pat is one of the longtime members of the Seattle Storytellers Guild. She's a member of our Golden Circle and always one of our favorite tellers and favorite MCs. She's got a real knack for that. So we welcome Pat Peterson and a story that involves fireworks.
Oh, thank you, Judith. And lovely to be here tonight. And I just wanted to say how wonderful it was to be able to hear Ellen dipping her toe into storytelling performance. It's an exciting thing to see. And I could tell that she had a real heart connection with that story. And I look forward, Ellen, to hearing more stories from you. Welcome to the club. Well, the year was 1950, and my father had been assigned to Belleville, Illinois, to an Air Force station there. And up until that time, I had spent all of my 9 years in Oregon at various Army or Air Force posts. And so it was late summer when we arrived. And I have to tell you, it was sort of like being in another country. The climate, it was so hot and heavy and humid. It wasn't all bad, though. For one thing, there were fireflies. Now, I had read about fireflies in some of my books and fairy tales, and I had never seen them. And of course, I did what so many children before, and I assume after me, have done. Because I like to read late into the night when my light in my bedroom should have been off, I captured a bunch and put them in a mason jar, screwed the lid on, put holes in it so they could breathe. But in the morning, there were just little tiny bodies on the bottom of that jar with their little legs up in the air. Now, I was lucky. We moved into a duplex, and our next door neighbors had a boy named Les who was my age and was going to be in the same grade at St. Mark's Catholic School, 4th grade. So it was nice to have someone who could kind of show me the ropes, and they had lived in that neighborhood for a long time. You know, when you're a new kid on the block or in school, it takes time to find your way. Les was an only child too, but he had a best friend that he'd had for years, and his friend's name was Collins. Now, Collins didn't go to St. Mark's. Les told me he wasn't Catholic. He was a PSK, which stood for public school kid, which meant he was slightly dangerous and a bit unpredictable. But I didn't pay much attention to that because he was always very nice to me, just very curious about what it was like to go to that Catholic school with those nuns with those black flowing robes and headdress. Well, the boys kind of took me under their wing and introduced me to the neighborhood kids. I mean, we were free range. We would, in the summertime, sit on that porch, and then we go out in the street and play games. The boys played a lot of softball, and I wanted to play too, but I wasn't very good at it. And I spent a lot of time sitting on the sidelines because they kept telling me I threw like a girl, which was very true. my father, seeing that I was pretty downcast, took pity on me, and he bought me a wonderful baseball glove, and he showed me how to work it and oil it and make it fit my hand. And I'll tell you, those boys didn't have a glove like that. And I learned that for the ability for them to borrow my glove, they would let me play, even if I did throw like a girl. Well, all that year, things went on. We had a routine. Every Saturday afternoon, we would go to the movies. We loved Westerns. Well, I really loved Westerns. And for 25 cents, I could get a double feature Western with a newsreel and a cartoon and a travelogue and a box of jujubes. I was in love with Roy Rogers. I didn't care too much for Dale Evans. I kept hoping that maybe her horse would throw her and I could have Roy all to myself, but she seemed to manage riding pretty well. Well, long about springtime, the boys started telling me that I better watch out because the cicadas were coming. And I said, cicadas, what are they? And they said, oh, they're these bugs. They live underground for about 17 years under the ground. And then when it starts getting warm, they emerge from the dirt. Oh, they're awful looking things. And they have the most terrible sound. And they come out and they cover the ground like a moving rug. And they'll come right up to your shoes and climb up your legs to your ankles. And they'll chew right through the bones and you'll fall over and they'll eat the rest of you. Well, I will tell you that I was just listening a lot at night and putting my foot over the side of the bed very cautiously to see if there was anything there. And finally I decided I would ask the school librarian about it. She said, okay, what you need to do is on your recess, now you have to give up playtime for knowledge. You go into the library and get out the encyclopedia. There they were. Remember all those wonderful encyclopedias? And I got the right one and opened it up and I read all about the cicadas. Now, the 17-year thing was true and I saw pictures of them. Oh, they looked awful. Big eyes on the side of their heads and antennas, but they didn't say anything about eating people. And so I asked the librarian and she said, oh, somebody tell you that they were coming? And I said, yes. She said, well, we're not in the 17-year cycle. Every now and then we get a few kind of like that. But dear, you don't have to worry about it. And just be careful what you listen to. Who told you that? But I wouldn't tell because I didn't want Les to get into trouble. So long about May, one afternoon, the boys said, Pat, no more movies for a while. I said, why not? They said, well, we got to save up the money for fireworks. I said, for fireworks? You see, all the places I had lived in Oregon, well, maybe there were a few sparklers, but I had never seen like a commercial exhibition or anything like that. And nobody in the neighborhood had anything much except sparklers and things. They said, oh, down at the drugstore, he sells fireworks and we got to save our money for the big night. So I did. I gave up Roy Rogers for something that was unknown to me, but I just had to trust those boys. So came time, first part of July, we walked into the drugstore. And there on the shelf where all the candy usually was, the Necco wafers and the little wax bottles with the liquid inside and licorice whips and everything else had all been moved away. And there were cardboard boxes with things inside. And we each got a brown paper bag. And the boys said, now, Pat, you got to just let us tell you what we need to get. we all had about the same amount of money. So we were going to pool everything together. And the boys said I needed to trust them. And I did. Well, the night of the 4th of July, I have no idea where my parents were. It was late. It was pretty dark. We were outside, and the boys said things had to go in a certain sequence. So we started out with little smoke bombs, and then there were these snakes that looked like little black pellets that were lit, and they'd kind of curl up and drop over, kind of like a snake or a worm, and then just turn to ash. And then there were these things called ground flowers that went around real fast and sent off sparks, and there were some cones and some fountains. And one of the neat things was a couple of these big square things. And Les went and got a hammer and nails, and we tacked them on telephone poles and lit them. And they just went round and around and around. Colin had a really good lighter. And then there were some, I said, I wanted to try a firecracker. And I reached in and pulled out this little tiny firecracker. And Colin said, that's a lady finger. And I said, well, light it. It's small. He said, no, let me show you something better than just lighting it. And he pulled the wick out, broke it in half, and said, now hold this, and I'll light the powder. And I did. And sparks shot out. Oh, it was wonderful. Didn't make any noise, but it made a wonderful sight. And then there were some firecrackers, and Les dropped one right down the storm drain. Wow, that thing echoed all the way up and down the street. And finally, the boys said, well, they're all gone, except for one. The air was fragrant with that smell of spent fireworks, and on the ground were bits of paper and little spent fountains and things here and there. And Colin brought out a green glass, big 7-Up bottle. You know, back in the 50s, Coke bottles or pop bottles weren't made out of plastic. They were made out of glass, and this was a great big one. And he set it down on the ground, and he said, stand back, Pat. And he took something, the last thing out of his sack, and he lit it and dropped it into that green glass bottle, and it just blew up something terrific, way up into the sky. It made a huge noise, and I will never forget the sight of those glass shards going up towards the street light and the sounds they made as they came down to the pavement. Oh, it was glorious. Now, I have seen fireworks displays since then, and I have celebrated by lighting off a few things of my own. And in 1976, Richard and I stood on the grounds of the Washington Monument and watched the bicentennial fireworks show there in Washington, D.C. It was amazing. But you know, I don't think anything is ever going to live up to that 4th of July when that green glass bottle exploded up into the night sky. I can still hear the sound of those glass shards coming down on the pavement. It was a glorious 4th of July. Thank you.
Wow, amazing. But it sounded dangerous to me.
What is life without a little danger, Judith, after all?
I guess so. We spent several 4th of July down at Long Beach in a house with another family, and went out into the dunes to have fireworks because they weren't allowed in the part of Vancouver where we lived. And that was pretty exciting indeed, but nothing like yours, which sounded... I never met a cicada either, so you're ahead of me there. Thank you very much, Pat. That was great. Great. So And our next teller is Marilyn Gravstead. She is the hostess of our monthly story swap on the first Friday of the month, and they're going to continue through the summer. So please come at 7 o'clock on the first Fridays. And Marilyn always thinks up a great topic that's kind of like an icebreaker. Everyone tells just a couple of sentences about the theme, and you get to know the people a little better. And there's some very interesting stories doing that. And she is going to tell us, well, sounds like a very interesting story indeed. And here's Marilyn. Please welcome.
This story is from the Arabian Nights, or 1001 Nights. It's called A Tale of the Leg of Mutton. And if you remember, in the Arabian Nights, King Shahryar married a young woman, and they had only been married a week when he caught her in bed with the cook, and he was furious. He was so mad. He had her head cut off right away. Not only that, he vowed to marry another woman every month and have her head cut off. Now, it was his vizier's job to find these virgins for him, and as you might imagine, started running out of young women. His daughter, Scheherazade, said, "Oh, father, let me go. I'll marry him." "No, I'm not going to let you marry him." "Oh, please, please, father." "No, I don't want you to get your head cut off." "Oh, father, I have a plan." "You won't cut my head off." Finally, she talked her father into it, and she went and married Shahryar, the king. And her plan was that every night she would tell him a story. Some of the stories were continued from one night to the next. So when she told it, he didn't dare cut her head off because he wanted to see how the story came out. So she said to Shahryar, "You know, King Shahryar, how you always say that a woman judges a man by the size of his purse. Well, King, this is the story of just such a woman. Her name was Raya. And Raya could not find a man rich enough to marry. Now, she was dating Harem, and Harem worked during the day, and she was dating Akil, and Akil worked at night. Harem was a pickpocket. No, Harem was a burglar. And at night, he burgled all the houses, and he even went down to the ships that were rocking on the Nile, and he burglarized those people too. Akil was a pickpocket. He picked the pockets of the people in the bazaar, and he picked the pockets of the people down at the cattle ranches, the cattle bidding places. And she took Harem, and she showed him a house near Victory Gates in Cairo, and she said, "Oh, Harem, look at this charming little house. If we lived there, the rent is 200 dinars a month. If we lived there, we would be in happiness the rest of our lives." And the next day, he took Akil to the same house and said, "Oh, Akil, isn't this a wonderful little house? If we got married, we could live here, and we would be happy all the rest of our days." And the next day, she married Harem, and then she married Akil. The two men didn't know about each other because Harem worked at night, like the hyena, and Akil worked during the day, like the jackal. Now, Raya had a very nice budget with both of these men. And And she got, when it's time to pay the rent, both men gave her 200 dinars to pay the rent. And she had all kinds of money to manage the household. In fact, Hiram would brag to his friends at the inn, my wife is the most beautiful dressed woman in Cairo, because she had plenty of money to buy silk ribbons for her hair and silver necklaces and bracelets and clothes made out of India silk. And Akil, when he went to the baths, says, my wife can do more with a household budget than any woman you've ever seen. Now, one day, Hiram said to Raya, I must go into the rift in the mountains to a conference. Now, it just so happened there was a conference. There was a famous bandit who was putting on a conference for all the swindlers and the tricksters and the pickpockets and the thieves. And it was going to be a wonderful conference and a festival. And so he said to Raya, I'm sorry, I must go away on business. And she said, oh, roof of my house. Oh, mast of my sailboat. I will miss you so much. But she packed some food for him to have on his journey and kissed him warmly goodbye. And then Akil came to her and he said, oh dear, I need to go to a conference in the rift in the mountains. And she said, oh, floor of my house, keel of my ship, I will miss you so much. But she packed some food for him to take on the journey and kissed him goodbye. Well, Hiram had walked all day and it was getting late. He decided to sit by the side of the road and build a fire and keep warm and camp there. He was warming himself by the fire and they saw a shadow walking by the road and he said, hello, stranger, come share my fire. It was Akil. And Akil sat down beside him and they sat by the fire. And then, as was the custom, they laid the flaps of their packs down and filled them with the food they had brought for the journey. And Hiram said, I can't believe my wife. My wife is so wonderful. Look at the food she left for me. She left grapes, she left nuts. Look, she left a half a leg of mutton and here, a half a loaf of sesame bread and cake and melons. Akil said, well, what a coincidence. My wife gave me the same food. She gave me grapes and nuts. And look, she gave me a half a leg of mutton and half a loaf of sesame bread and cake. And Hiram said, look, our leg of muttons fit together exactly like pieces of a puzzle. Our wives must shop at the same butcher. Akil said, where do you live? Hiram said, oh, I live very near Victory Gate. Akil said, look at this bread. The two halves fit together perfectly. Does your wife buy her bread at the baker? Oh, no, my wife is much too thrifty for that. She bakes her own bread. In fact, yesterday I could smell this bread baking. And Akil said, and I too could smell this bread baking because I believe we slept in the same bed. When they realized that, they jumped up and they went at each other's throats, and Akil said, wait. Don't be mad at me. We have more in common than two brothers with the same mother. It's that Raya that's done us wrong. She has robbed each of us of half a wife. So they gathered up their stuff and they headed back to Cairo. They were so mad. They opened the door of that little house by Victory Gate, and they were walking up the stairs and they said, we should tear her limb for limb. She has robbed us blind. They went up, they saw Raya and they grabbed each of her by an arm and they started pulling her arm and she said, what are you doing? They said, you should be pulled in half like the wishbone of a chicken, and whoever gets the biggest half can have you for his wife. And then, if he doesn't want that, we will try to give you away to anybody who wants half of a wife. And she said, oh, my dears, you see, when a man is making a lot of ruckus like this, it only gives a woman time to think of a response. So she said, my dears, what can possibly be the matter? Of course, you're entitled to my life. You're entitled to do whatever you want, but what is it? They were so surprised when she said that, they both fell over on the floor. And she said, don't you know, I loved both of you so much, I couldn't decide who to marry. So I married you both. And it was perfect because Hiram, you work at night, and Akil, you work during the day. And with the household money you're giving me, do you really think that you would be wearing those fine linen shirts and that I would be dressed in silk and silvered necklaces on one pickpocket or burglar's salary? We have the perfect marriage. And she said, husbands, go to that conference in the Riff. The head of that conference is my brother. And tell my brother, that famous bandit, that I am happily married to two of the most wonderful men in the world that will take care of me for the rest of my life. And so they left. They went to the conference and they came back and kept their odd marriage arrangement, but no one in Cairo knew. They kept it a secret. But years later, people found out. They thought it was so strange. And some people said, oh, it was that criminal that was her brother. They were totally scared of him. And other people said, no, I don't think that's it. I think Raya had so much influence and was so persuasive she could talk these guys into staying married. But really, think about it. Do you think one small woman could totally outsmart two men whose whole life's career was one of trickery and deceit?
Oh my, oh my, oh my. I don't know. I think it worked today. I think everyone with their cell phone and taking pictures, and I don't think it worked today. What an arrangement. My, oh my. Oh. So following Marilyn, we have Marilee Stephenson from North Vancouver, who's probably going to tell us a personal story. So let's applaud for Marilee. Marilee.
Okay, let me just get that there. I'm getting a glare here. Let me just, the light has changed from where I was. Okay. This is a story of a storyteller. I never was close to my dad. I didn't know him very much. He was kind of, 50s, and Pat will relate to this. We moved all the time, 20 times before I was out of high school, and he had to go ahead for the job, and then we'd be there. So didn't see him much. But also, sadly, when I was about 12, we moved for the first time in our lives after living in Florida and Georgia in a 2-story house. And when he would come home at 3 a.m, I would hear my mother question him. Not harshly, nothing like that. But he was a compulsive gambler. And even if you're 12, you kind of know when your mother says, but George, we don't have the money. So it made me very, very distant from him for many years. I went to school in Berkeley, then I went to school in England, did my PhD here at UBC. I went on with my life, and eventually they divorced, far too late. Eventually they divorced, and he remarried rather precipitously. and married into the most horrible relationship you could possibly imagine. He was just in agony. It was sort of an accident all around. And there he is stuck with someone who, not an unpleasant person, but an unbearable person. So I didn't see him. I saw him even less. Was very, very uncomfortable. So it wasn't until he'd retired, and he was probably close to 90 and lived in a small town outside of Orlando. And we would just occasionally exchange a card. But I thought, well, Marilee, he's getting older and all that. And I wasn't angry anymore, except sort of in theory. You ought to go visit him because you don't know when or what's going to happen. You should visit him. And I don't like to regret things I didn't do. I don't mind regretting things I do, but not things I didn't do. So I write him a letter and I say, hey, Dad, I'll come down and see you. And he writes back, I mean, he wrote back, if it had been email, it would have been, instantly. But he said, we'll go fishing. We'll go to Chazowitzka's canoe place. We'll go to Old Joe's and we'll get the worms. And I've got the reels. So we'll use bamboo poles, and we'll do that. I'm still struggling here with this thing. It may not be inconvenient to you, but it's bothering me. Just a second here. Not quite sure what I can do. Oh yeah, this is what I did. Maybe. I looked like I just got out of a prison here, but we'll just do the best we can. Okay. So he's ready for everything. And when I got off that plane, he was there. And off we go. And it was a place that had canoe trails. And we're sitting in a canoe. He had grown up in a farm, 9 kids. His mother was a midwife, actually, in very rural Florida. And we're just sitting there in sort of, I think, what you'd call companionable silence. And he starts chuckling to himself. And I said, what is it, Pop? He said, I like a man who's got a way with words. And I said, well, what about that? And he said, well, old Jim, they're always old somebody, particularly with Southerners, right? He said, a person is nervous as a cat under a guava bush. And he laughs, and I laughed a little bit. And he said, you don't know why that's funny, do you? And I said, no, actually, I don't. He said, well, you think of a cat, and y'all know guavas, right? You can get them in stores now, the yellow sort of lemon-sized things, some kind of fruit, pink insides, and they have a very strong smell, right? They're an invasive species, but in any case. So he said, you know how guavas are, and when they fall, they rot very, very quickly. So say you're a cat doing its business, spelled BIDNESS, doing its business, and you do your business, and then you look over, and there's where the guavas, and you say, what is that? And then you try to bury that, and then you look around again, and you try to bury that, and so you're nervous as a cat under a guava bush. And then he started telling me about how they collect turpentine. And, turpentine was essential all these years. Now with acrylic paints, it's different, but turpentine was essential to any kind of painting. And you had to make sure you mix it in, even if you got it at Sherwin-Williams or somewhere, you had to mix it in the correct percentage. And your painter you had to have a good painter who knew how to do that, do the right thing. Otherwise you'd waste the whole thing, right? And so, but the thing is, in northern Florida, they had the piney woods. It was the long needle pines, which have a lot of resin, of course. And what it would be is they were very large forests. And he said you would have a buckboard, which is just a plank with wheels and a mule and a seat across it. And he said you would have a buckboard, and you had to clear 10 foot around each tree so the buckboard could get around. And he said if I may use the term, the colored boys, that was regarded as polite under the circumstances, you know, as Southerners. He said what they would do is they would cut hash marks across the tree, right, like a chevron. They'd have a pipe sort of thing, and the sap would come out, and they would have a bucket. And what would happen is when your bucket was full, you would call, he said, you would call the tally man. And I never thought about it really, you know, like, please, Mr. Tally man, Tyler my bananas. Well, it was, of course, the same thing. And he said, but they didn't call out, they didn't use their names. What they would do was they'd each have a distinctive call, a distinctive sound, maybe generated out of their names, but sort of and he would say there'd be sort of a who there and a wah there, whatever. He had the most beautiful hands, and he would describe this, and he said it was like raindrops. Hearing this, it was like raindrops. And then he told me more, because I'm just sitting there quietly listening to all that. He told about going with his mama as a midwife. My dad was born in 1913, so this could have been 1900, you know, 20 years of the 9 kids, right? Could have been the 1890s, who knows? And in absolutely rural Florida. And he was with her one time, he was 10 years old, and it was this terrible, terrible lightning storm. Florida really has them, you know, the hurricanes, but the lightning storm, and it splits the trees, it's terrifying. And they're on the buckboard going to help deliver this woman's child. And the family are so poor that the only thing they have to wrap that baby in is newspapers. And then the baby's name was Storm Baby. And the thing is, that was a tradition with this family. Whenever and however the child was born, that's what it was named. I don't know if they had sort of like Hot Day Baby or whatever, but this one was called Storm Baby. So we continued on just listening and seeing the occasional bird. And he actually told me, for instance, later he said, I've been seeing the birds and I've been seeing the Joe Ree bird. And I thought, I know my birds. There is no Joe Ree bird. And so I said, hey, Pop, just draw it for me. So he did, just very simple. And of course, it's the towhee. Most of us know the towhee, right? That if we're in Seattle, we do. It's all around the spotted towhee. But that was what it was. And of course, why do we call it towhee? Why do they call it Joe Ree bird? And those really what are now 100-year-old terminology, probably not used anymore. So when I look back on that, I don't even know actually when he died. We weren't that close again. My sister kind of took care of those things. And I do know from a friend of his, he was very, very lonely at that time. The marriage, again, was never a source of comfort. And so I think, true, we were never really close. But when I think of that time sitting and listening to him as we're sitting in a canoe in the swamp in Florida, that I would give an awful lot to be able to sit there with him again and listen to his stories. Thank you.
That's a part of the world I haven't been to, and so now I have a feeling of swamps and canoeing, or going down in the water.
And they're not our kinds of swamps, of course. Yeah. They have very low water, but it's very clear, very clean. The Okefenokee swamp and has the cypress stumps, the beautiful things like that, the lovely birds. Probably not much of it left, but it's not mossy, boreal forest swamps or anything like that. A whole different matter, very open. But there were the canoe trails. So even more so, like in the Spanish moss hanging down from the trees. Yeah.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that story and about a parent that was far away and then closer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And Katsy's here now. And she's from Southern California, I think. And did you want to tell tonight? Or are you just visiting to see what we're doing?
I I have a story.
All righty. We technically, I think we're out of time in about 10 minutes. I'm willing to stay longer if Barry is to do his thing. And he says, okay. And we can have a little bit of a chat time afterwards after all of that. And we'll just talk about that. But welcome to Seattle, so to speak. And for the, I think your first visit with us.
It is indeed.
Okay. And we hope we're going to enjoy your story. I mean, we know we'll enjoy your story, and we hope you'll come back for another time too. Okay.
Thank you.
Hands together for Kathy.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My story is called The Raven, and it starts like this. Enveloped in my papasan chair, 90-degree heat tangles with streams of cool air on my shady front porch. Oh, it feels nice. The luscious emptiness of my thoughts are hit with a barrage of, well, is Steve just gonna let this lawn die? I look over the lawn, dry to its yellow bones, amoeba patches of parched cocoa earth peek through. I smile thoughtfully, wondering if that booming voice is what had landed her the role of the clock tower lady in the Back to the Future movies. I cluck. I don't know, Elsa. I don't know. My formidable elderly neighbor grumbles and pushes her sun-baked, dull red Pilford Target cart, rusted wobbly wheels to her garage in the back of her house next door. I adopted the kitten found behind that garage. She loved animals, but was allergic to cats. As the years moved on, I got to help her more and more, driving her wherever she needed to go, helping her fly home to visit her family. But shopping every Saturday was our favorite thing. She allotted $74 for groceries every week, and she kept me on alert at the grocery store. I could be getting items on her grocery list a few aisles over, and sometimes I would hear, hey, that lady had a set of lungs. We spent many weekends at the Motion Picture Academy because she was on the Foreign Film Committee, and big and here, we loved the delicious treats served between those foreign films. I was working as a precinct coordinator for the election day 2, early voting, dog-eared, tired. At home, I'd showered, towel wrapped my wet braids, and heavily slipped into sleep, only to be startled awake by a call. Elsa had passed. She had donated her body to science, and they were on the way to collect her. Speaking with her relative, it was decided that I would meet them there and see her off. At her home, I signed the paperwork quietly as my eyes began to sting as the attendants delicately wrapped and secured Elsa in white sheets tied with white ribbons. They tenderly rolled my friend into the van. I stood in her front door watching, glistening tears cascading down my face. My heart heavy heaved as the van rolled away with my friend, taking away a part of me. Thank you.
Let's see. Sorry, I hadn't muted myself, but I think I didn't make any noise because it was a fascinating story. My. Yeah, neighbors can bring on burdens and joys and experiences you wouldn't otherwise have. Thank you
Judith,
very
could I
much.
interrupt?
Hmm?
Could I interrupt?
Now you can.
Kathy put in the chat, I don't know if you saw it or not, but she achieved her bucket list this last year. She marched in the Rose Parade.
Wow.
And she's going to be opening a brand new musical about the public library called Shh. And she plays the senior librarian, and it opens on July 14th at Pasadena City College.
Wow. Well,
thank you for coming, Kathy.
Thank you for having me.
Yes,
I want to come back anytime.
Great. Well, we'll put you on our list, and you'll know what's happening in Seattle. And as long as
Barry is the one, that's how I heard about you. Barry sent out an email, I guess yesterday or the day before, that said, something in the headline, hey, we need you, or want to come play with us, something like that. And I clicked on it, and it was like, hey, want to come tell a story?
And there you did. And
Yeah.
Thank you. It was beautifully crafted with beautifully crafted, I would say.
Elsa, it was a crafty woman. She was the clock tower lady in Back to the Future. She also was in the iconic Titanic scene where the elderly couple, gives up their place on the boat. I believe they played the Waldorf, or they played a real couple in real life, but they went down with the Titanic, and you see the water rushing in to. Yeah, she was fabulous. She was a crusty woman and very fun, but boy, she had a set of lungs on her.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Now, and Marty said, if we had time, she has a fairy tale variation, and it just depends on how long you can be here. And she said she was going to practice how long it was. So would you like to tell it?
It's 8 minutes, and I don't have to tell it because I want to hear the end of your story.
Okay. I don't know how to deal with that. I don't want to do it by vote. So I would love to hear your story.
Well, we're running late. It's okay. I'll tell it in another one.
Okay. We'll hope to hear you at another one then.
Okay.
And I don't think this will be more than about 3 or 4 minutes for the end of the story. Yes. So here we are. You remember Miko and the little man who had jumped out and said, I have these wonderful things for you. And then you hear, how far did I get? Someone's going to have to tell me. Maybe I told. The little man jumped out, right?
She went away. She asked for the sunshine and she went away.
Aha. And I always think of Miko as being a guy, but it could be a woman. And the sun came out and Miko was zapped. You know what? I told you the whole story, practically. But since that day, trees don't talk to people. Well, they've never talked to another human being. But if you are out in the forest or the woods and you listen really carefully, you might hear whispering up in the treetops saying, if you care for us, we'll take care of you. If you take care of us, we'll take care of you. And that is what we all need to do. A story from Estonia called Miko and the Trees from Margaret Reed MacDonald's book, Earth Care Tales. Thank you. I meant to stop after he got the wand or after the little man jumped out. Oh, well, I won't do that again. continued next time is not my best forte, I guess. So if you have an 8-minute story that just takes us 10 minutes over, we could do that, right? Wave your arms if you want to hear Marty's story. And I guess if you don't,
Okay.
you can go away, but I'd love it. Thank you.
Okay, command performance.
Yes. And Marty lives just up the street from my cousin in Ellensburg. And I got to go visit her.
Yeah, so
What?
are you coming for Dachshunds on Parade?
No,
Tomorrow.
no. Sorry.
Unfortunately. Okay.
Here you go. Marty is going to tell us a fairy tale variation.
They call me the big bad wolf. But let me tell you, I'm neither big nor bad. I'm kind of average sized for a wolf, maybe even a little small. And there's an echo somehow. Okay. Maybe a little small for a wolf. And I'm certainly not a bad wolf. I'm a really good wolf, because if I wasn't good, I'd be dead. Yeah, we hunt. That's how we make a living. And I'm pretty good at hunting. So I'm actually a pretty good wolf. Now, you've all heard the story of the 3 little pigs. Yeah? It's not right. I'm going to tell you what really happened with the 3 little pigs. It was one day I was living in my little woods and I was really hungry. And so I went hunting. And what did I come across? A pig. And let me tell you, I love pig. It is the best, from the snout to the tail, from the hoofs to the back. I just love pig, especially bacon. Bacon's the best. So I sniff around and I come across the little pig. Oh, one little pig, and it's living in a straw house. And I'm like, who builds a straw house and lives in a straw house? I mean, really. But I try to be polite to my dinner. So I knocked at the door very politely. And I said, little pig, please let me come in. And you know what that little snot said? That little snot said, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. Well, that kind of got me. And so I said, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in, which was pretty easy. It was a straw house. I barely had to puff. And the thing fell apart. And I looked around and the pig was gone. And I was still hungry. So I went back hunting. And I came across that little pig and another one. They were together. And we all know 2 pigs are better than 1. They're twice as good as 1. So I went around and I found them living in this house made out of sticks. A little bit better than straw, of course. They're living in this stick house. And I knock on the door. And I say, little pigs, please let me come in. And what do they say? The little snots, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin. So I, very hungry, drooling a little bit and angry, say, then I'll huff and I'll puff and I'll blow your house in, which I did. It was a little harder than the straw, but then the house fell apart. And the pigs were gone. I really, really got to remember to look for a back door when I'm in these situations. So I'm still really hungry. I really wanted some pig, but I go hunting again, sniffing around. And now there are 3 pigs. The first 2 and a third one, and they're in a brick house. And I just can't believe my luck. I'm going to have 3 little pigs, because I'm going to look for a back door. But first, little pigs, let me come in. I'm really hungry and angry. And they don't say, not by the hair of my little chin chins. Instead, the third one says, all right, I'll let you come in, but first you got to answer a riddle. I was like, a riddle. I kind of like riddles. Okay, what's the riddle? What has 4 wheels and flies? What has 4 wheels and flies? So I start thinking about everything that I know of that has wheels while I'm walking around the house, checking it out. And I think a car, but that doesn't fly. A truck, but that doesn't fly. Motorcycle, but it's only got 2 wheels, plus it doesn't fly. And meanwhile, I'm back to back. There's no back door. The windows are high and narrow, so the pigs aren't going to get out of that. Okay, what flies? Well, there's flies, but they don't have any wheels. Birds, no wheels. Moths, no wheels. Airplanes, but they only have 2 or 3 wheels. So I go back to the door and I'm like, can you tell me that riddle again? And the little pig says, what has 4 wheels and flies? So I'm still working on it when next thing I know, I'm being jostled along in the back of some kind of vehicle, and I'm in a cage, and I ram my head against one wall and nothing happens, and I chew on the bars and nothing, I can't get through it. And meanwhile, we're jostling along in this vehicle until eventually it stops, and I'm kind of dizzy and headachy and disoriented. And they pull the cage out with me in it. These 2 people in green uniforms with green hats. And of course, I'm a wolf. I'm not for sure it's green, but I think it was green. And they open the cage, run back into the truck, and I cautiously get out of the cage and look around, and I'm in a totally new place. No idea where I am, but after all this time, I've been here a while. After all this time, I can tell you there aren't any pigs, not a single pig. I'm stuck eating things like mice and rats and raccoons. No pigs, not my favorite kind of stuff. And it's cold here. It's colder than it was where I used to be. And I pieced together that what they did was, while I was trying to figure out that silly riddle, they called animal control and had me move to this place far away from where I used to live. Plus, the worst of it is I don't know the answer to the riddle. Does anyone know? You know, Judith?
Yes, I bet it's a garbage truck.
Yeah.
So I'm smarter than a wolf. I was not expecting that, Marty, at all. I know some other true stories of the 3 little pigs where the wolf denies it all. But this one was really special. Congratulations.
Thank you.
For inventing that version. Thank you. And thank you all for hanging in there.
I have to give credit to what's it called? Flaming the Embers?
Fanning.
Fanning, thank you. Fanning the Embers, where I worked on that a couple of years ago. And it's totally different from what I worked on, but they gave me some really good ideas, and I recommend Fanning the Embers to anybody who is interested in spending a weekend in a beautiful place and having great food and company and working on stories.
Sounds like fun. And I told Barry we'd do